everyone, welcome back again. Have I got a video for you this week? Ever got a video for you? Yes, I've got a video for you this week. And is it an awesome one? Yes, I think it is an awesome one. Before I get into that, quick note. If you happen to see my video last week, I did mention that my video lately has been really cruddy. It's just off my phone, and it's been really weird. Well, I mentioned that this week it would be better. This week it is not better because I ordered a new camera, and I got a new camera, and I haven't gotten a new camera in a while, and I forgot that cameras take SD cards, or little tapes, depends on the kind you get, but mine takes an SD card, and it did not come with an SD card, so I ordered the SD cards, and they should be here soon. So next week's video will look better, I hope. Anyway, on to this week's video. You will definitely recall, I'm sure, that I did a video once before with every single movie in the Turner Classic Movie Collection. Part 1. Because, let's face it, that is a heck of a lot of movies. And even on the Max streaming, which is where I'm watching them, they don't have them all. It's streaming. They switch them out. It can be so annoying. Every month there are new ones, and then some of the other ones are gone. Not only that, but I am watching them backwards. Because I'm me. You know, I'm talking a lot already. See the first video for the explanation on that. Anyway, last time, part 1, I got from Z to W. And of course, since they've switched them out, there have been some more that I've had to catch up on. So, this is catching up on Z to W, but also there's V and U. I was going to go TUV, but there's an awful lot of T's, and I haven't gotten that far, and that would be a very long video. So I thought, okay, we'll just cut to the quick and do a little bit now and a little bit then. So enough from me. Let's get to the movies. Young Man with a Horn, 1950 American movie directed by Michael Curtiz? Gosh darn it. I've only ever seen it written. It stars Kirk Douglas, Lauren Bacall, Doris Day, Hoagie Carmichael, and Juano Hernandez. This is based on the 1938 novel of the same name by Dorothy Baker, and that in turn was inspired by the life of Bix Beiderbecke? I think that's right. So I do believe this was Kirk Douglas's starring debut. We meet his character as a child. He is an orphan cared for by his sister who doesn't really care for him. So he is kind of aimless in life. He goes out to wander aimlessly in the streets. He goes to a mission where they are having services for alcoholics and such like, and ends up playing the piano when they all go into dinner. He enjoys that, but he's looking for an instrument he can carry around. He espies a trumpet in the window of a pawn shop and starts working in a bowling alley in order to save enough money to buy it. Well, on break there, he hears music from the small nightclub opposite. He wanders in after hours and ends up befriending the trumpet player there. This is Art Hazard, played by the exemplary Juano Hernandez. Under his tutelage, the child grows into an excellent jazz musician. He first gets a job playing for a typical dance band of the day. He befriends the piano player, played by Hoagie Carmichael, who I just absolutely love him, and also befriends the singer Doris Day. However, he meets his first but not last bit of professional impediment, because he has to stick to the song arrangements and play just as the leader wants him to, whereas he is a jazz man. He wants to improvise, and he gets fired after he organizes a jam session during a break in sets. He and Carmichael leave the band, but they go their separate ways. So sometime later, he and Doris Day find one another randomly, and she finds him a job with a new dance orchestra. She goes one night to hear him play and brings along her friend Lauren Bacall, which is her first mistake. So Douglas falls for Bacall, who is studying to be a psychiatrist. She has a lot of issues herself and claims to be incapable of feeling love. However, he pursues her and eventually succeeds in convincing her to marry him. She doesn't even enjoy his music, and she's not interested in her career. This causes an inevitable rift. They begin to quarrel. She goes back to school. He begins drinking. His old friend and mentor, the trumpet player Hazard, finds him, and he tries to give him advice, as he has for so long. But Douglas won't listen and berates him. Hazard winds up leaving the bar and getting hit by a car. Douglas does not have time to apologize before his friend dies. There's another quarrel, which ends up being the final thing, and he separates from Bacall, in the process of which she introduces him to her girlfriend, who is, we're not so much clear about that, but it's her girlfriend. So he's upset by that, and he's feeling very stunted from having to play in another dance orchestra where he's not able to improvise. So he gets himself fired and then just ends up wandering aimlessly again. He becomes an alcoholic, and even when Carmichael and Day get him into a recording session, he cannot keep control. He loses control of his instrument and collapses. He ends up destroying the trumpet and wandering around the city, just losing himself in the bottle. He collapses in the street, and a cab driver takes him to a sanitarium where he can dry out. They find out he actually has pneumonia. Carmichael comes to his side and has him transferred to a hospital. And luckily it's not too late. He is able to recover his health, falls in love with Day, and ends up being able to rediscover his music, and all turns out well. Apparently, Carmichael, who narrates the film, was a friend of the real Bix Beiderbecke, so he added some realism there, and that helped give Douglas some insight into the role. Douglas does an excellent job mimicking playing the trumpet. However, the playing was done by big band man Harry James. Unfortunately, the happy ending did not occur in the life of Beiderbecke, who did pass away of alcoholism at age 28. This is an interesting film given its time. There was an over-reliance on psychiatry to either fix everything or to not fix everything, and that proved that it works super well. Along with Bacall's character, there's a lot to dissect from a modern-day perspective. That said, this is an excellently made film. I really quite enjoyed it. And it helped me learn about Juano Hernandez, who plays Hazard. Juano Hernandez was a Puerto Rican actor who was a pioneer in the African American film industry. He was also seen in the films Intruder in the Dust and The Breaking Point, Sidney Lumet's The Pawnbroker. He was a pioneer in the African American film industry. When he was young, he was first a sailor, then he was hired by a circus and became an acrobat. After that, he was a boxer. Then he worked in vaudeville and minstrel shows, of course, sang in a church choir, and was a radio script writer. He perfected his diction by studying Shakespeare and starred in radio's first all-black soap opera. I mean, this guy was amazing. He gives such a touching performance. An amazing actor who I feel I should have known about far sooner. He really should have been a big star. His character was treated with great respect, and what I loved was that when his character passed away and Douglas went to his funeral, it was set in an African American church, and that sequence was treated with great respect. These people were shown as people and not stereotypes. That was lovely to see. This was a really good film. Very much recommended overall. The Working Man, 1933, starring George Arliss and Bette Davis, directed by John G. Adolphi. It is based on the story The Adopted Father by Edgar Franklin. Now, I've heard of George Arliss, never seen him in anything. He was quite charming in this. It was pre-code and contains references to, drinking and partying and getting out of control, but other than that, there's not much that really marks it as a pre-code film. Now, George Arliss plays the head of a shoe company, which is very successful. It has a rival shoe firm who he is trying to best. He finds out that the head of that shoe firm has passed away, and it is left to his 2 children. Then he is on a fishing trip, taking a break, when he happens upon the said children who are going to inherit the factory of the rival shoe company. So he decides to use this as an in to spy on their company. He hides his identity and gets himself invited to their boat. He starts in with spying on them, but then he begins to like them. They in turn see him as this poor old man who has nobody else in the world, and they invite him back to New York and end up adopting him as their new father, more or less. He becomes a trustee of their estate. They expect him to just allow them to do as they please, but instead he does more or less act as a surrogate father. He takes over the company, and instead of running into the ground, he runs it. He gets the boy Tommy in to run the company and forces him to grow up and really take charge of something. His sister, played by Davis, meanwhile, is wanting to find out why their company's shoes are less popular than the rival company, so she hides her identity and takes a secretarial job with the rival company. She finds herself attracted to the person running the company in the president's stead, who is his nephew. They end up falling in love. Of course, all comes clear at the end. And at first everyone's upset, but then Arla suggests that the companies merge and all is put to right. It's kind of a quick way to wrap up the ending, and all of a sudden everything's okay, but it's just that sort of fluffy, funny little movie. It's not a watch again movie, but I do recommend it as a watch once movie. A Woman's Face, 1941 American drama, directed by George Cukor, or is it Cukor? Gosh darn it. Starring Joan Crawford, Melvin Douglas, and Conrad Veidt. I'm pretty darn sure I've got that close to proper pronunciation for a change. This is based originally on a play, Il était une fois. Another version was filmed prior to this in 1938, starring Ingrid Bergman. That was a Swedish production entitled En Venus Ansikt. Right, yeah, that's right. Okay, so this one is very much a melodrama. Really, I don't know. It's pretty dated and a bit suspenseful, but also decently soap opera-y. Okay. Joan Crawford is a woman who's had kind of a rough life, but not so much as they make out, really. When she was 5, her father, who had his own issues, accidentally set fire to the house, and in that fire, her face was scarred. So naturally, since the scars are on one side of her face, like right there, whenever people meet her, they see the scars and react at first. And this leaves her, she takes this to heart very much. And it leaves her very angry at the world, and she turns to a life of crime. I said it was a dated plot. So her friend is a restaurant, and it's really a blackmailing ring. One night she meets a gentleman played by Conrad Veidt, and he looks past her scars, and they become involved in a romantic relationship. However, he also is attracted to her because she's not a nice person, and neither is he. As part of the blackmail ring, she goes to a young woman's house one night in order to get money in exchange for some love letters that the woman has sent behind her husband's back. The husband comes home unexpectedly and catches Crawford, who has been trying to escape through the window, making it seem like she is just a sneak thief. He also catches sight of her scars, and he happens to be a plastic surgeon who specializes in scars. He decides to go ahead and operate on her if she is willing. Of course she is, and it takes 12 operations to clear up the scars. But at the end, and it's not revealed right away, which, it's so incredibly obvious that the operation was a success that you wonder why they drag it out. But when they finally reveal her face, oh my god, she looks like Joan Crawford. Anyhoodle, she reveals her face to her boyfriend, who in turn reveals that he is definitely not a nice person because he is second in line to possibly inherit money from his uncle.
the uncle has bequeathed everything to his little 4-year-old grandson. However, if the boy dies, then her boyfriend will inherit. So he convinces her to go to Sweden, where the family is, become the boy's governess so that she can do away with the boy. Even she has qualms about this, but she's so in love that she ends up agreeing. So she goes to Sweden, and wouldn't you know it, she becomes fond of the family and really just loves the little boy. There's a moment where they make it suspenseful, like she's in the position that she can hurt the boy, and they act like, oh, maybe she's going to do it, but really, you know the entire time that she's not going to do it, so the suspense really doesn't work. Anyway, the plastic surgeon also, by chance, happens to get invited to a big party this place is having, so he ends up there. He gets wind of what's going on and kind of keeps an eye on things. Now, I should mention that all of this takes place in the past. In the present, she is on trial for the murder of someone who we have not been told who it is yet. However, it's obviously not the boy. This is 1941. They're not going to do away with a 4-year-old child, and thank goodness. So in the present-day courtroom, they are questioning the plastic surgeon, played by Melvyn Douglas, who admits that he has in fact fallen in love with her and out of love with his unfaithful wife. In the past, we see him getting more and more on her side as they talk together and go into each other's confidence. At the very end, there's a very dramatic scene where the would-be boyfriend, the evil one, in the end there's a very dramatic scene where Fight attempts to do away with the boy himself and make it look like an accident. And Crawford and Douglas go after him in an attempt to stop him, and that is when we find out that as a last resort, she pulls a gun and shoots Fight, who falls to his death in the icy river, which is really quite cool. Pun not intended. So that is what the trial is all about. It's not initially clear that their story is the correct one, so we don't know if she's actually going to be put into prison or not. However, it is then revealed that she had also sent a note prior to all this stating that she thinks this guy is a bad guy, and therefore she wasn't really a bad person herself. So this plot is a bit over-involved. It's also a very dated idea that your outward looks affect your inner being, because really, she's maybe questioning this a bit before, but not that much, and it's only after she gets the surgery that she becomes a good person. It's like, really? This one is mostly interesting for its cast. I like Melvyn Douglas. He wasn't really outstanding here. The cast, however, also features such common for the time supporting actors as Donald Meek and Marjorie Main, who I actually did not recognize at first until I heard her voice and was like, oh, yeah, I can't mistake that voice. Other such popular people popping up as Henry Daniel, George Zuko, and Osamasen, who I have actually only ever seen in one other movie. She was one of those foreign actresses that they brought over trying to make her into the next Bergman or something like that, and frankly, she just wasn't a very good actress. But it was neat to see her in something else. So hey. Yes, this was not a very good film. It was one of those where it's like, hey, it has one or two cool shots, but overall, it was pretty forgettable. The Woman in Red, 1935, American, directed by Robert Florey, and starring Barbara Stanwyck and Gene Raymond. Apparently, there was also a film from the same year entitled The Lady in Red, so not to be confused with that one. The Woman in Red is also a bit of an odd title, given that this is a black and white film. It is based on the novel North Shore by Wallace Irwin. And it is about a lady equestrian who falls in love with a polo player from a wealthy family. They get married despite objections from both their families. She is then called upon by another wealthy man who is a good friend and who's always had a torch for her, but is just the best because he subdues his own desires because he realizes that she doesn't want him anyway, He does ask her as a favor to help him to entertain some wealthy clients aboard his yacht. While there, a female passenger accidentally drowns, and the man who owns the yacht, her friend, is arrested for murder. So the friend who owns the yacht does his best to keep her name out of it, even though she is a witness who can prove his innocence. However, at the end, she realizes that she has to stand up for him as he has stood up for her. She shows up at his trial and testifies on his behalf, even though doing so may cause a permanent rift with her husband's family. However, her husband also shows up and supports her, and all comes out right at the end. This was not an especially interesting or exciting film. Standouts I felt were John Eldridge as the friend who owned the yacht. He really was just exemplary as a character. And Genevieve Tobin as their mutual friend, Mrs. Nicholas, nicknamed Nico. She portrayed an excellent society woman who is a young, rich, something that rhymes with rich. In pretty much everything, she was passive-aggressive, she was manipulative, did it all with a smile on her face. Her character came across much as the Paris Hilton of her day. Not that I'm saying Paris Hilton is any of those things, I don't know her, I can't say that. I'm just saying that that's the type of character. Also, there was a minor character named Mrs. Casserly. This was played by Doris Lloyd. Doris Lloyd, as you may have seen my Voices of Alice in Wonderland video, more likely you have not. Anyway, Doris Lloyd played the Rose in Alice in Wonderland. In any case, this was not an especially interesting film. I don't feel the need to go back to it. It was nice to see Gene Raymond in something else. I've only ever seen him in the film Flying Down to Rio, where he did not impress me. In this one, he had a little more personality and life. But other than that, just not a super interesting film. And honestly, I love Barbara Stanwyck. She was a fantastic actress, but I've never seen her. They treat her as a gorgeous woman, like not a beauty queen, more like the girl next door perhaps, but just, he sees her, he is enraptured, and I've just never seen her as that sort of person, so I didn't quite understand that. Winter Meeting, 1948 American film directed by Brittain Windust, now there's a name, starring Bette Davis and Jim Davis, no relation. This was around the time where her career started to wane and she got unfairly labeled as box office poison. And quite frankly, you can see why. This is a very strange film. It is marketed as a romantic drama, and the two leads do fall in love in the film. Jim Davis portrays a hero, a war hero, who has come to New York City and is being lauded by the everyday public, and he is having trouble coming to terms with it because he certainly doesn't feel like a hero. Bette Davis is a poet who is upscale and white bread and, doesn't go out on dates a lot, the spinster type of woman from this era. So she gets invited out to a restaurant evening with her good friend, who is absolutely coded as gay, and I will come back to him in a minute. It is a double date, if you will, with the war hero and her friend's secretary. However, the hero proves to be more interested in Davis than in his date, who is portrayed by Janice Page, and I don't remember ever seeing her in anything either, so that was very cool. He takes her home, she invites him in for coffee, and she resists but then succumbs to his charms when he tries to kiss her. He comes back the next day, and they kind of, play at house in her apartment. She invites him to her country house, where he spends the night, and they spontaneously share secrets about each other, including her father's issues and doing away with himself, and her issues with her mother. And he confesses the guilt he feels about the war. I'll come back to that in a minute. At the end, they part ways amicably, having both, helped each other to come further along in their lives and grown as persons, and etc. Okay, first of all, Jim Davis and Betty Davis, I didn't believe for a second that they were in love, a couple. They don't look right together. They didn't feel right together. They both did their darndest as actors, but it just wasn't believable whatsoever. Second of all, this film was very choppy, just in the way it went from plot point to plot point. Especially once we got to the house and they're revealing their secrets. Like, okay, they're talking, she reveals the thing about her father and her mother. It's a pretty big deal. Because she blames her mother for driving her father to ending his life. So that's a lot. But then, I wasn't really getting, he already had issues with being a war hero, but I wasn't really getting that there were any other issues. There's a big part where she comes to him, it's dark, it's the middle of the night, he's standing by the fire, she goes to see what's wrong and like kneels down before him, what can I do to help you? And he says, all my life, I've wanted to become a priest. A priest. And she's like, I knew it all along. And I, as an audience member, was going, what? Huh? Where did this come from? It was just so out of left field that I burst out laughing. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't, oh my God. It just didn't seem to work at all. That said, let's come back to John Hoyt playing Stacy Grant, the coded gay friend. Of course, this is never explicitly addressed. It's 1948. However, for that, he is treated with dignity as a character. He is shown to be, not particularly emotional, not, very withdrawn and distant, but he stands by his friend steadfastly. And he is given the dignity, which not every coded gay character was in those days. He's given the dignity of being quite a bachelor. He does not have a wife, as so many of them were given, but he was a bachelor. This was not questioned in any way. It's just that was who he was, and everybody was okay with that. So that was kind of neat. The other thing that was neat was seeing Florence Bates as Mrs. Castle, Betty Davis's housekeeper in the country home. Florence Bates normally plays like a high society lady, as in the movie Rebecca, so it was very cool to see her in a different sort of part. And honestly, that's all I can recommend about this movie. It just didn't work for me. The Window, 1949 American movie based on a short story by Cornell Woolrich. It was directed by Ted Tetzlaff, who used to be a cinematographer. It stars Barbara Hale, Arthur Kennedy, and Bobby Driscoll, a popular Disney youth actor, aka the voice of Peter Pan. This was distributed by RKO, home of the low-budget film. It looks like a low-budget film, but that does not impede its storytelling. This is a really good, suspenseful film. Driscoll stars as Tommy Woodry, a young man who lives on the Lower East Side in a tenement building, and he has a habit of lying. It gets hot in the city, and late one night he goes to sleep on the fire escape, where he sees his neighbors from upstairs, who seem like normal people to everyone. They murder someone in their apartment. Of course, he is the only witness, and nobody believes him when they try to tell him. In fact, his mother even takes him upstairs to the neighbors, tells them the story, and tells the boy to apologize, which tips off the neighbors. Then they try to get to the boy in order to silence him. Things escalate. Like I said, it's very exciting, it's suspenseful, and the ending is, quite frankly, dangerous. I will tell you it comes out well in the end, because there's a child in danger, and I personally have trouble taking that in a story. So yes, thankfully, all turns out well. This is a very, very good film, and Driscoll gives an excellent performance, showing that he's got more to him than just Disney. Very much recommend this one as well. Go watch it. The Wild North, 1952, an American Western film, more or less Western, directed by Andrew Martin, starring Stuart Granger, Wendell Corey, and Sid Charisse. I say more or less Western because it's set in Canada, so, Western slash just like frontier adventure, I would more place it as. So, Stuart Granger plays Jules Vincent, a French-Canadian guy who likes to say baby a lot. He is out wandering the wilderness and stops in a small town. He meets a singer in a saloon played by Sid Charisse, who was not a singer, she was a dancer. There is no dancing in this film. Her voice is dubbed for singing. It seems a bit of an odd choice. She also plays a half-Native American woman. This was 1952, after all. He helps her fend off a drunken man trying to get her attentions and agrees to take her by canoe up north to her tribe. The former drunken man has apologized, and they have agreed to take him with them. Now, when they arrive at the village, the other man is no longer with them. We don't see exactly what happened, but they tell the chief that the other man had acted recklessly and wanted them to run the rapids, and they would have gotten killed had not Vincent gone ahead and shot the man and wound up killing him. This was an accident, but they will have trouble proving it, so Vincent decides to head alone into the wilderness to evade pursuit by the police. Now, Wendell Corey is a member of said police, and he decides to go after Vincent. He finds him, takes him into custody, and they start back to the station, trekking through the frozen wilderness, which is treacherous and very exciting. Now, I'm just going to quickly address the fact, again, that Sid Charisse, a white woman, is playing a half-Native American. This was not uncommon in 1952. It's not correct, and it's not even polite. That is addressed. The other Native Americans in this film appear to be largely Native American actors, so that was very nice to see. Everything else about this film I absolutely loved. This is an exciting film. I loved the characters. It is shot on location. In 1952, this was not unheard of, the African Queen and all that, because we had some post-war money that the films were throwing into these movies, trying to get people into the theaters and away from their television sets. This is the sort of film in full color. It's beautiful. It should have been in VistaVision or such like, but again, this was just before they bought the technology. So unfortunately, this is not in letterbox, which it would have greatly benefited from. However, they still have these amazing landscapes, and for the most part, they shot on location. It's breathtaking. The character development through everything that the two men go through is predictable, but highly satisfying. Again, very much recommend this one. Do go watch it. When Ladies Meet, 1941. Directed by Robert Z. Leonard, starring Joan Crawford, Robert Taylor, Greer Garson, Herbert Marshall, Spring Byington. I mention all that because I will come back to that. This was in fact a remake of a 1933 film, which I have not seen. It wasn't on the docket. Basically, Joan Crawford is a best-selling author, and she falls in love with her publisher, who is married. This bugs her longtime friend, Jimmy, who has wanted her to marry him. She has always turned him down. We're sympathetic to Joan because she is a woman so much in love that she is really not thinking about it logically. She believes very much that the publisher and his wife are going to separate and everything will be a-okay. She also believes that it's possible that if she and the wife were to sit down and talk, they would come to an agreement. Her friend Jimmy is skeptical of all this. However, through the machinations of the plot, this does in fact happen. At first, the two women don't know who each other are, but they talk and get to like each other, and even after both of them find out what is going on and who each other is, they are still sympathetic towards each other, and rightfully place the blame on the publisher himself, which is quite neat. Now, all that said, the casting here is interesting. I have never seen Greer Garson in anything that I can recall. She is rightfully renowned as a very good actress indeed. Herbert Marshall plays the publisher, the rake, as it were, the man playing around, and he is touted as a ladies' man, and I have only ever seen Herbert Marshall as like the faithful husband, so I just could not wrap my brain around this one. If he and Robert Taylor as Jimmy the friend, if they had been switched, I could see that. Robert Taylor was charming in the part of Jimmy, could come across as kind of annoying, especially when he tried playing little games, but then again, you could kind of see his side because nothing else he was doing was getting through to his friend, Mary, played by Joan. We also have Spring Byington as a mutual friend of them both. I have only ever seen her in You Can't Take It With You, and this part is very much like that part, only she's a little more of a society lady in this one. The West Point Story from 1950, a Hollywood film directed by Roy Del Ruth, starring Jim Cagney and Virginia Mayo, as well as Doris Day and Gordon MacRae. I have never seen Gordon MacRae that I can recall in anything other than Rodgers and Hammerstein, and it has been a long time since I've seen any Rodgers and Hammerstein, only when I was a kid, I think. Doris Day I've always loved, Jimmy Cagney as well. Virginia Mayo I've never been a big fan of, but I liked her here. She did a good job in her role. This story is about a Broadway director who gets roped into helping the cadets at West Point put on a show, and there are romantic complications and etc. That's basically it. It is not a big sweeping sort of plot. It's just a cute little musical. But the odd thing about it is the fact that this is 1950, and it's just a light, fluffy, black and white, not letterbox yet, because we didn't quite have that for a couple of years in films. So it's just your sort of basic type of musical, which I am used to, and I like those, but I'm used to seeing them from an earlier era. I don't expect this sort of film from 1950, so that kept throwing me off. Also, what really struck me was the fact that it's placed at West Point, and they went and filmed at West Point for backgrounds and long shots of the main characters walking through the hall into the theater. The shots are decently long enough that I had trouble telling whether it was in fact Cagney and Mayo walking through there or not. When they cut to medium shots of them, they are walking against a screen, which leads me to think that they only had limited permissions and time to film at the actual place. Therefore, when they do any other shots placed at West Point, it's either on a set or on a set with a screen in the background. And there is so much of this that it becomes very distracting. And it just comes across as very weird. High points, Doris Day is always charming. I feel Jimmy Cagney is a little hyper here. It is a little bit over the top. It seems like they were trying to capitalize on his Yankee Doodle Dandy character. The film was also AKA Fine and Dandy, and the marketing for it says it's another dandy, which, they tried. And the choreography for the dancing is quite good. There is a dancer in here featured named Gene Nelson, who I had never heard of. He is very good. And that's basically it. It's just not a very memorable film. Watch on the Rhine, 1943, made in America, directed by Herman Shumlin, based on a play by Lillian Hellman. This stars Bette Davis and Paul Lucas. There are a couple of Academy Award nominations scattered in here, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Lucas. He won. This is set in 1940, just before America entered the war, and that's what it is about. We have a German engineer and his family, his American wife, fleeing Germany and coming to America. They have been working in the resistance. Her family is rich and bigwigs in Washington, D.C., so they have a refuge to go to. America at that time was very much separating itself from the conflict in Europe. However, there were signs that it was not going to be that way. The rich family in question also has a house guest of a Romanian count. He turns out to have been conspiring with the Nazis at the German embassy. His wife and then others find this out, and there is a showdown at the end between him and resistance worker Paul Lucas. This is an interesting film, mainly because of the subject matter and the time in which it was dealing with all this, and I do recommend it for modern day audiences, particularly in America. That said, it can be a little staid, a little stolid, just a little talky in parts. Betty Davis does her dramatic Betty Davis thing, in which she makes some grand speeches and is very much standing by her man, and yeah. So it's nothing from her that you haven't seen before. I found Paul Lucas to be just a little bit more interesting, much as I love Betty Davis. Lucille Watson, as Davis's mother, does the rich matriarch society lady thing for which she is known, one who has a heart of gold and takes no guff from everyone. But there's an extra layer to her performance given that everything that she finds out her daughter is going through. Also in this film, Lucas and Davis have 3 children who have never been to America, and so that adds another interesting layer to it. They are fairly serious children, having grown up in all this conflict and seeing everyone just having to stand up and fight if necessary to work, and they've had to grow up a little earlier than is normal. That said, their youngest child I found a bit annoying just because they played with that a bit, and he tended to give these very pompous little speeches. And it was cute enough, and that also served to get the idea across, but it just got to be a little bit much. So this is an interesting film to go and watch. I do recommend that you do that. As a film overall, it wasn't one that I found particularly exciting. I think it's a watch once. Film fans will also be interested to see Beulah Bondi in a slightly different role. I'm used to seeing her as the sweet mom and everything. She's still sweet here, but she is the French, I believe, housekeeper. So not the mother, just like the trusted friend, and French, as I said. It was slightly different for her, so that was neat. Volunteers. Oh boy, get me started on this movie. 1985, directed by Nicholas Meyer, starring Tom Hanks, John Candy, and Rita Wilson. This is what I call a pseudo-comedy. It wants very badly to be funny. Okay, so this was the mid-'80s. Tom Hanks was doing roles with, I don't know if more range is we know him today as the nice guy, right? The nice guy actor, even though he doesn't always play a nice guy. See the Elvis movie. But in this one, he is playing a spoiled rich kid who graduates from Yale and just talks. He has the accent, I'm a rich kid. And we don't hear that from Tom Hanks nowadays. He ends up with a giant gambling debt. To avoid the people who are coming to break his kneecaps, he trades places with a friend who is in the Peace Corps and going on a mission to Southeast Asia, where he is going to be there for a couple of years. So predictably, once he gets there, he doesn't want to do anything, but he gets to know the villagers. He falls in love with a girl, and that's his in to try and act like a better person. Then he becomes a better person. They help the villagers build a bridge, and the bridge, unfortunately, is not only the army wants them to build it, but also a local Chinese communist force and a drug lord, and they end up having to blow the bridge up at the end in order to thwart the communists and etc. In our classic 80s and prior tradition in Hollywood, this film relies on very racist jokes overall. I really didn't like it at all. It was neat to see Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson working together so early. As we know, they have been married for how long? Very, very impressive in Hollywood and all that. And John Candy is always lovable. He was the best part of this. I also always love to see Gede Watanabe, who plays the villager who speaks English and, works with them against the communists and etc. However, as with many of Gede Watanabe's roles, he ends up having to deal with a lot of the racist humor. There are a few very bad jokes, which I will not repeat here, and jokes is in quotes. Racist or no, it's just not a funny movie, and I was just tapping my fingers waiting till the end. I don't recommend this one. Victim from 1961. This is a British film directed by Basil Dearden, and it stars Dirk Bogarde and Sylvia Sims. I have heard of Dirk Bogarde. This is the first thing I remember seeing him in. Most excellent actor, if this film is anything to go by. This film, okay, again, 1961, and the entire movie, I kept going, this was 1961! Holy cow! This was, according to the Wikipedia, the first British film to explicitly name homosexuality, being what it is, and to deal with it sympathetically. That was really cool. So, in a nutshell, the plot involves Dirk Bogarde as a barrister, a lawyer, in London, and he is up and coming. He has been working hard his whole life. He is a very successful lawyer, and he is poised to get more success and become a Queen's Counsel and possibly a judge. That's a big deal. He does have some skeletons in the closet, He gets a call from a young man who is in trouble. This young man happens to be somebody who he once had an affair with. Now, the attorney is happily married. He's got this whole career. He doesn't want anything to mess with that. However, in the course of following up on this young man who ends up dying, he uncovers and gets involved in a blackmail ring. There are blackmailers out there who are going after necessarily closeted homosexuals in the area. Now, at first he doesn't want to get involved because of everything, but then he realizes that it's coming for him anyway, and he's really just got to go and do the right thing and expose these blackmailers, and in so doing, himself. Now, his wife knew that he had some stuff in his past, but he had promised her that he had put that aside, and he and she come to the realization that this is just a part of him, that he cannot put it aside. And it takes her some time to come to terms with that, but come to terms with that she does, and she is very much on his side by the end. Now, as said, this film actually deals with it sympathetically. There are several characters in the film who are not homosexuals, but who are allies, and who prove it by their words and even actions. The blackmailers themselves, who see themselves as the normal people, and the homosexuals as the divergent weirdos, the blackmailers, as I say, are shown to be really quite awful people. Did I mention this was 1961? And the performances all around are so good. I definitely recommend this film.
Vampyr.
This is a 1932 German film directed by Danish director Carl Theodor Dreyer. It stars Rina Mandel and a young man credited as Julian West, but in fact this was the Baron Nicholas de Gunsberg who also funded the film. And this was interesting. I was watching the film and it's black and white and darkly lit a lot of the time, and it doesn't seem to be remastered. But I was watching it and I'm going, is he black? It was a little hard to tell. Well, I looked it up, and he did have, his mother was half Portuguese, so that may be what I'm picking up on. Anyway, this film was of the German Expressionist sort of school. It was a gothic horror film. And there's not a ton in the way of plot. It's more about how everything looks and the mood that you're left with. Basically, this young man is a student and he comes to this inn out in the country and stays there, and all this weird stuff happens. And he reads in a book about vampires, which is in fact part of what's going on. The vampire legend here involves creatures who suck blood and gain control over people, both living and dead. A vampire can be defeated by opening its grave at dawn and driving an iron bar through its heart. There are some really cool shots in here, and even if you can't quite tell what's going on, you're still like, oh my god, that is so cool. How did they do that in 1932? There's a really neat sequence where the student has like an out-of-body experience, and they use, like double exposure and whatnot to show that. But he also envisions himself as having died and put in a coffin with a window, and they carry him away to be buried. So he both sees this happening, but then we also see it from his perspective from the coffin, and that is just really cool looking. There are so many cool shots in this film. As I said, it's really more about the look and the feeling that it gives you than any sort of plot. When I looked this up to get the requisite information, I saw another website, I think it was Collider or one of those, describing this as an A24 film that just happens to have been made in 1932. And I think that is an excellent way of putting it. I recommend this for any film fan who wants to see some cool stuff. Vacation from Marriage, aka Perfect Strangers. Apparently Vacation from Marriage is the American title, and it's not a very good one, quite frankly. 1945, it is a British film directed by Alexander Korda, and it stars Robert Donat and Deborah Kerr. I had never seen Deborah Kerr in anything up until this movie, and I'd only seen Robert Donat in 39 Steps. I haven't seen Goodbye Mr. Chips yet. This is a cute little movie about a young couple who they have been married for a couple of years, and they have already settled into a rut, and it has affected their personalities pretty severely. I've really enjoyed both their performances in here, as the couple have just become very pressed down by their situation and kind of mousy and not really wanting to speak up. It is the war that actually shakes them out, which really isn't a vacation from marriage. That's my issue with the title. They both end up going into the war. What is it? The Navy, the Coast Guard? I forget what exactly. I think he joins the Navy and she joins like the Coast Guard. So they separate from each other for a couple of years. And both of them end up coming out of their shells and kind of discovering who they are. Then when they get together at the end, both of them are determined that I've outgrown this other person. I'm going to get a divorce. But then, of course, they end up falling in love all over again. I found this movie incredibly charming. I really loved it and would greatly enjoy watching it all over again. Despite the fact that at the end, when they're walking through the London streets, it's clear there wasn't much of a budget and it's very soundstage bound with the paintings in the back. It's incredibly clear. But that said, the rest of it is just, I really loved it. And it helped to have Glynis Johns in it too. Remember Glynis Johns? From Mary Poppins, The Court Jester, etc., etc. I always love seeing her, and she also was very charming in this one. Under the Volcano, 1984, directed by John Huston, which I hadn't known going in. I was like, oh wow, that's cool. Starring Albert Finney, Jacqueline Bisset, and based on Malcolm Lowry's 1947 novel. This is described as a not easily accessible work, which I can well believe. There were some very cool moments, and there were good performances. Albert Finney and Jacqueline Bisset are a rich couple who live in a small town in Mexico. When the film opens, she has had an affair. They've had a falling out. She has filed for a divorce and moved away. And he had, well, I don't know if he was an alcoholic in the first place, but he's an alcoholic when we meet him. She comes back and wants to reconcile. And they think maybe they can make a go of it, but factors just end up being too much. Complicating matters is the fact that his half-brother, who was working with him, is the man she had an affair with. He too has gone away and become a journalist, and he comes back as well. He is family, and his brother still loves him, so they're trying to navigate this they all want to move on, so they're trying to navigate life now and find their new normal, but they're really just not able to do that. The movie ends in an extended sequence in a mountainside cantina, which is also a bordello, and rain falls, tempers flare, things don't go well, and they end badly. Under the volcano, the title derives from the fact that there are 2 volcanoes that rise above the town. However, those don't really have anything to do with the plot, so it's like, I can see where they're going with it, like all the rising emotions that they're trying to keep down are kind of like a volcano under the surface and everything, but at the same time, I feel like if they had really given more allusion to the actual volcano, like I barely realized it was there, or even that mountain was a volcano. I don't know, I feel like it would have worked better. As it was, this was well shot and decently acted, and I was really rooting for Finney and Bissett to work things out, even though I knew it was probably unlikely. This isn't even 2 hours, but it just seemed too long. And the downer of an ending, like I say, was just too extended. I just really kind of wanted them to wrap it up by that point. High point was seeing Katie Gerardo again, or Gerardo, who was in a lot of films back in the 40s, largely Mexican, but she was also in High Noon. Next is The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, 1964, directed by Jacques Demy, starring Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo, aka Les Parapluies de Cherbourg. I'd heard about this one for years, I just never gotten around to watching it, and it was very interesting. It is a candy-colored, light and fluffy take on rather a serious sort of romantic story. It's also termed a musical, but really it's an opera because there's no talking in it. At the same time, there's no songs. The entire thing is sung. It's basically sung dialogue. The story is about a couple of young lovers who, through reasons, end up not being able to be together. He has to go off and serve in the army and ends up leaving her alone and pregnant. They have not been together for very long, and nobody really expects that she'll be able to wait and he'll be able to wait and they'll be able to stick this thing out. So we follow mostly her experience. She works in a shop with her mother selling the umbrellas of the title, and they are struggling to get by. So we follow a lot of that. She decides to have the baby and raise it. While pregnant, another man who is rich and gives them money to get by falls in love with her, and her mother ends up talking her into marrying him instead. He ends up finding out about the pregnancy and is such a stand-up guy that he's like, yeah, okay, I'll take the baby and raise it as my own. Wow. Then her boyfriend eventually comes back from the army, finds out that she has married another, is sad, and ends up marrying somebody else. They eventually meet up again at the end and kind of have a moment of closure. And that's about it. It is beautifully shot, and Catherine Deneuve is beautiful, and I liked a lot of the people in it. It was a very interesting idea, having the whole thing be an opera, basically. But then again, it kind of wasn't at the same time. Like I say, this was just sung dialogue. There was a moment or two of music where I'm like, oh yeah, I think I've heard this. But it wasn't like you're going to walk out of the film with songs in your head. It just didn't I don't know. I was like raised on operettas and musicals and such, and to me that's what it is. You get something that sticks with you, and when everything is sung to what sounds more or less, it's just dialogue, it doesn't rhyme, I don't know. It's not able to stick with you because nothing stands out from anything else that way. So, charming film in its way, but not one I want to watch again. Ugetsu. It is a 1953 release from Japan. It is based on Ghost Stories by Ueda Akinari, directed by Kenji Mizoguchi, starring Machiko Kyo and Mitsuko Mito, etc., etc. A lot of people in this. Though honestly, I'd say the standout here is Machiko Kyo as Lady Wakasa. We meet two couples who live in a small town. This is during wartime back in ye olden days. The war has not yet reached their village. The one couple has a small child and they work in pottery. The husband really, really wants to sell pottery and make something of his life for his family in order to give them a better life. The other couple, the husband has big dreams and big ambitions. He wants to be a soldier and a samurai and, go as high as he can get, even though that's not his class in life. And they are all friends. The pottery dude decides to take his pottery and sell it in the big city or big village or whatever it is, so they go on this journey. He sells his pottery and does pretty well. One of the people he sells his pottery to is this super fancy and mysterious lady. She loves his pottery so much that she asks him to bring a whole bunch to her big fancy house, which he does. While there, she entices him and he falls under her spell, like literally as well as figuratively. And he forgets his family and ends up staying with her. Now a whole bunch of other stuff happens. The war comes to the village, and both his family and the other couple have to run and hide. There's a separation, and the other wife ends up getting sexually assaulted since her husband is not doing his due diligence and is not there to help protect her, which is a big thing in Japanese society still to this day, as I have come to understand. Now, back then, it wasn't the woman's fault, but it would just destroy her reputation, so she ends up working in a brothel, which is where her husband later comes across her, and they reunite. As for the guy who's under the spell of the fancy lady, he eventually finds out that she is a ghost. He goes into the marketplace and meets people there who are like, "What? You were at this place? But that's been run down for years." He goes back and the fancy lady is gone and there's nothing there left. He goes back to his village to reunite with his family, goes to his house and finds his wife there and his son, and his wife cooks him dinner and all this, and he is very happy to be home. The next morning, his wife is gone and it is revealed that she too was a ghost because she was killed by enemy soldiers. So basically, excuse me if I'm getting this wrong, but the whole thing seems like a moral tale of be happy with what you got and don't go chasing waterfalls. Also, this was one of those movies that clued me into the fact that Japanese aristocratic women, anyway, the higher classes, used to pluck, or they would shave their eyebrows and they would paint in new ones. This was called hikimayu. And I was wondering why the heck they did that. Well, there are a couple of ideas. One of them is that women decided to start wearing their hair long, hanging down on each side of the face, and this made the forehead really noticeable, so they tried to fill it in somewhat. This is also around the time that noble women started to blacken their teeth using a solution of iron filings and vinegar, and I was wondering why this was as well, and I'm not exactly sure, although I did find out that it was considered beneficial to health because it acted as a dental sealant. That's pretty neat. But it's also possible that black was just considered a symbol of beauty, like especially glossy black. And also there's a current custom where when women in Japan smile, they tend to cover their mouth, and that is said to derive from this. Personal thoughts on this movie: I thought it was okay. I don't know. I'm not too much for ghost stories, at least ones without a real, maybe not resolution. This had a resolution, but like, why was there a ghost? And did you learn anything from the experience? I don't know. It's hard to put into words. This actually, I had watched it before, and I didn't feel like I really had gotten it. I didn't feel like I really understood the plot, so I rewatched it for this video purposes, and I still didn't quite. I understood a little more what was going on, but it still didn't leave so much of an impression on me.
Okay, well that proved to be an interesting collection, or collection of a collection, I guess. It's neat if you're going alphabetical order or backwards alphabetical order, or just some type of order that is not by genre or by star or really by anything that's related, because you get the most interesting mix of movies. And these were a very interesting mix of movies. Some worked for me, some didn't, some were a revelation, some were eh. But that's how it is anytime you watch a movie. What did you think? What ones sounded interesting? What ones have you seen, and what were your thoughts? I'm just so excited to hear it, so leave them down in the comments. I will end this video now because it is beautiful outside. It is totally spring here. It's like the first gorgeous day we've had for a long time, so I am actually gonna go and get outside. I'll try and get a few clips of it so you can see what I'm talking about. You go enjoy your day to the best of your ability. Watch more movies, read more books, and do please take care of yourselves and each other through these uncertain times, and always and ever. I'll see you next week. Bye.